Hello and welcome to the life story of Karen Selway-Richards. We're about to embark on a journey through the musical life of Karen. Enjoy.
I am Karen Elizabeth Selway-Richards. I was born on the 22nd of February 1961. I am sitting at the desk in our bedroom, which is currently Clive's workspace, and I'm looking out into a very foggy day outside. And I know without going further that there is mud everywhere. Years 1 to 5, when I lived in Bristol, were pretty happy, pretty regular. There was a lot of family around, perhaps not a lot of other children, but definitely a lot of family and friends. And I remember going off onto big family picnics and standing on tables and singing and showing off. I was quite bright. My mum definitely taught me to read by the age of 4, and so I was packed off to school. I've loved to learn all my life. It's been a huge thing, and being able to read from such an early age was very good from that point of view. The things I remember from school itself was being the only Protestant in the class and having prayers said for me, and being told off for running in the cloisters, and being a bit worried about pictures of guardian angels and worrying that I had people sort of looking over my shoulder. I was quite accident prone. I think before the age of 5, I'd broken an arm, a leg, I'd split my head open. Yeah, a regular childhood to the age of 5, I would definitely say. So my mum was 22 when she had me. My dad was 24. My dad was an aeronautical engineer by training. My mum had worked in a clerical position, but she was a full-time housewife by the time I was born. She was actually a really bright woman. Her father hadn't let her go to university to study languages, which is a great shame. I think by the time I was born, my dad had stopped being an aeronautical engineer and had moved into the marketing department. He was at Filton, working in the same division that did Concorde and everything. He is by nature an artist, and he had been taken out of school by his father for very lazy behaviour, I believe, and sent to do an aeronautical engineering apprenticeship. One of the songs that I do remember listening to, going to collect my grandma from work, was Downtown by Petula Clark. So sitting in the car with my mum, driving down White Ladies Road in Bristol to go and collect my gran, singing Downtown at the top of my voice. So I used to love singing along to songs all the time.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown. When you've got worries, all the noise and the hurry seems to help, I know. Downtown, just listen to the music of the traffic in the city. Linger on the sidewalk where the neon signs are pretty. How can you lose? The lights are much brighter there. You can't forget all your troubles, forget all your cares. So go downtown,
When I was 5, my parents moved to Cambridgeshire. My dad changed jobs. He went to work for Pi Unicam at the time in the marketing department. So we were uprooted from Bristol, went off to a little village called Hemmingford Gray near Cambridge. I went to the local primary, but because I was quite advanced academically at that stage for my years, they put me in a class way above my age. And I think I struggled socially, not academically, but socially. But, I was happy there. Then I had to wait for my peer group to catch me up, if you like. So I think I was in the same class for about 2.5 years. The whole time that we lived at Hemmingford Gray and I went to Hemmingford Primary, it was good times. Apart from when I was, I think, 8, I became really quite unwell and I had a kidney disease that landed me in hospital. Then I developed Bell's palsy, where half of my face became paralysed. And I think this all happened over the course of a year. And I was quite seriously unwell, particularly with the kidney disease. I think I was in hospital for a good few weeks. And then I came home and I couldn't go to school really for a year, which was fine academically. They used to send work home for me. I would sit at home working, and I loved it. But of course, you get left behind socially. For a year, I used to have to wear an eye patch when I went out of the house and things. And that sort of thing when you're 8 or 9 is really difficult, I think. I do want to share this because it is relevant. My father had set up in business on his own. His business was having enormous problems. My mother had a complete nervous breakdown when I was 9 or 10. And it was a difficult time. My grandma, who had lived with us, who I adored, went to live back in Bristol. And then we moved house to this big old rambling Elizabethan manor house thing in another village. I had to change school halfway through a year again. I had a 1.5 years at that school. And when I came to senior school, my parents sent me off to a private school, which was just dreadful. It was run by some racist old woman with a pervert husband. And I hated it. And it was really difficult. So I was asked to leave after 2 terms. I was a little bit disruptive, went to another comprehensive, and then my dad lost all his money and I went to the local comp in the end. And it was difficult, always being the new girl, always starting over, always just feeling quite self-conscious. My grandma, in particular, instilled a great love for musicals in us. And my father was hugely into amateur dramatics. So he was always in sort of light operatics. Rodgers and Hammerstein, he was in The Wizard of Oz and Carousel. And we used to go to see the movies at My Fair Lady, but especially The Sound of Music. I love The Sound of Music. I have seen it more times than I can possibly begin to imagine. I could have chosen any song, but I will choose Edelweiss, the rally, the Nazi rally at the end, where the whole of the crowd erupt and sing it. And it's a very emotional moment. But I love this song. I love The Sound of Music.
Small and white, clean and bright, you look happy to meet me. Blossom of snow, may you bloom and grow, bloom and grow forever. Edelweiss, bless my home and
I did a lot of music, so I started out playing recorders and things at school, and I formed a recorder group. So a friend and I would go around all the local churches playing Handel and Haydn. I took up the bassoon and I went to Saturday morning music school every Saturday. I started playing the piano, which became almost obsessive love in my life in my early teens. But all the time it was difficult at home at times. My mum was in bed a lot, and we had to cope with it. And then at one point, my father started up a business in Oxford. So my sister and I were left at home coping with a mum with prescription drugs issues, little brother, and everything else. even now when I look back at it, it was an incredibly difficult time. But it's kind of made me who I am now. I remember sitting on a bus going into Oxford one Saturday afternoon and watching people that I knew from school getting on with their mothers and going shopping. And this idea seemed absolutely preposterous to me, that my mum would get on a bus and go shopping. But that said, my parents welcomed our friends to our house incredibly. They were so welcoming. Well, unlike most little girls, I didn't go in for big crushes on pop stars or TV people, but I did have a bit of a crush on David Cassidy. And the song I Think I Love You is just one of my favourite songs, still one of my favourite songs. I loved everything about this song. And yeah, I'd like to share it now.
I think I love you. This morning I woke up with this feeling I didn't know how to deal with, and so I just decided to myself I'd hide it to myself and never talk about it. And did not go and shout it when you walked into the room. I think I love you. I think I love you. So what am I so afraid of? I'm afraid that I'm not sure of a love there is no cure for.
When I was 16, I met a boy who I went out with for on and off for the next 4 years. And it was incredibly important to me, that stability of that relationship. We literally went to gigs the whole time, and a lot of time was spent in Oxford with a group of friends I had in Oxford, going down, particularly in the early days, say around 76, 77 through 78, to the Oranges and Lemons in St Clement's in Oxford, which is now a pub called the Angel and Greyhound. But back in the day, it was a brilliant pub, punks in the front, hippies in the back, a song that will forever remind me of being a 16-year-old in Oxford, illegally drinking in pubs because you didn't need to have fake ID or anything in those days, and going to parties and racing around Oxford with a group of friends. And my boyfriend is Louisa on a Horse by John Otway and Wild Willie Barrett.
Louisa said, get me a saddle, boy, and go and mount my steed. You and me together are going for a ride. And up upon the hillside and upon Whiteleaf Cross, I say you ought to see Louisa riding and a riding, riding and a riding, riding and a riding and a riding and a riding on an ass.
I went to Leeds initially to read Russian and Chinese. I did Chinese A-level. I was really lazy. I mean, I think this is the thing. I was a very, very lazy student. You have no idea how lazy I was. And we lived a very eccentrically bohemian life. But everybody gravitated towards our house because my parents were wonderfully dysfunctional and free. And and so anything went, really. And they could smoke in our house, they could party in our house. My parents were incredibly generous and welcoming to them. So I didn't do any work. It's a miracle that I got to university. I did 7th term Oxbridge because I'm very academic snobbery, and I was still sure, even with the most appalling A-level results, that I would get into Oxford. So I applied to Balliol to read Chinese. I did Chinese A-level, and which wasn't that usual then. I didn't get in, unsurprisingly, and then I did manage to get into Leeds. But after I'd been at Leeds for a year, I'd never studied Russian, and got into the first week of Russian classes and thought, bloody hell, this is hard. What am I doing? However, I carried on. Decided to drop Chinese after a year because by this point I loved Leeds and I loved university life so much. There was no way I was going off to live for a year in China. And then I sort of took up economics to start with, but then I dropped that because it was very early morning classes and there was lots of maths involved. So I then did economic history. Musically, certainly remember the advent of punk. We were little hippies, and so we were little hippies in Oxford, underage drinking, drugs, the lot. We did it. But then punk exploded onto the world, and it was quite shocking. I think it's really hard for young people now to realise how shocking it was when you saw the Sex Pistols on the television and things. And oh my goodness, the music. And I was particularly into the Clash and the Buzzcocks. And I went to gigs all the time. I mean, every single band that came to Oxford, I was there. White Man in Hammersmith Palais, I don't mind. Anything. ESP from that album would be my probable choice. I loved Susie and the Banshees. I just used to go and see everything. A lot of Elvis Costello, Reckless Eric. We went on all the Stiff tours. Ian Dury. I could give you more. And then we move on a little bit. I mean, there were things like the Eagles, Hotel California, I will always think of, King Crimson. Probably the most important band to me was Pink Floyd in my mid-teens, and have continued to be. Dark Side is an album that I would take with me anywhere, would continue to take anywhere. And it has such resonance. And the song that I would play is Eclipse, the final track on Dark Side, which I just love. It says everything to me in a strange sort of way.
All that you touch, and all that you see, all that you taste, all you feel, and all that you love, and all that you hate, all you distrust, all you save, and all that you give, and all that you deal, and all that you buy, beg, borrow, or steal, and all you create, and all you destroy, and all that you do, and all that you say.
I went to study in the Soviet Union, which was fairly traumatic for me at the time. I lived at uni to dance and to drink and to be social. I'd like to say that I developed an enormous sense of hard work and self-discipline, but that would be a complete lie and not one that I can tell you. But I also learned to be resilient. It was living away from home for the first time, realising that there was a whole world out there. First of all, in 1982, about the time that the Falklands launched, it actually kicked off while we were in the Soviet Union, in Minsk at the time. And we were getting sort of very strange reports through. I remember queuing downtown for the phone to phone my parents just to see what on earth was going on. And so it was all right. But then by the time we came back, I loved my life in Leeds. I was a drama queen, sort of hysterical, doing all the things. I had no desire to go back there for a long term. So to actually go back to the Soviet Union then, Brezhnev had gone. I think we were in Chernyenko the second time that I went for the longer term. The morning that I had to go to the airport, I sat on the downstairs loo in my parents' house in Abingdon and thought, if I run out of the back door and scale the wall, will they still let me finish my degree if I don't go to the Soviet Union today? And I got there and thought, okay, I can do this. It was a defining point in my life because I did it and I made a success of it. I made a huge success of that time in the Soviet Union, which wasn't always easy, as you can probably imagine. Yeah, I really engaged fully with it, and it was outside my comfort zone. So yes, getting used to engaging in things outside your comfort zone, and that was a big one. So I actually met Clive on a wet Wednesday in Manchester in 1983, shortly before this trip to the Soviet Union. I so didn't want to go to the Soviet Union that I had found out that Manchester University were offering another exchange that got me back for the end of term. So we had to leave earlier, but I would have got back for the end of the summer terms parties right at the end. So I thought, oh, great. Okay, I'll do that. And thought Clive was very boring, dull man indeed. Pretty chilled, not my type. We would never have met at Leeds. I was very, very sort of trendy and my spiky hair and my black gothy clothes, and he was like a cricket playing farm boy. Our circles, we would never orbit at each other, even at Leeds. But because we were thrown together, we were just good friends for most of the time that we were there. And towards the end of our time in Minsk, because we'd been very well-behaved students, we were given the opportunity to go on a train tour of the Ukraine. Obviously, different times. Perhaps wouldn't be doing that so much now. And it was on that train journey that I suddenly thought, ooh, okay. Our relationship started to subtly change. Very surprising for both of us, I think. And when we came back from the Soviet Union, we miraculously kept things going and spent our final year at university going across the Pennines from Leeds to Manchester and back. There are a couple of songs that I would like to play in relation to Clive, and the first song would be Moving On Up by Primal Scream. It's been a shared joy. Primal Scream, we love Primal Scream. It's something that we absolutely share. We've been to lots of Primal Scream gigs. Our kids have had it bombarded through the house down the years. And so the first track, Moving On Up, is one that will always remind me of Clive.
Moving on up now, getting out of the darkness. My light shines on, my light shines on, my light shines on. I was lost, now found. I believe in you. I got no plan.
The Joshua Tree came out the year we married in 1987. We played this album to death. And I know subsequently it became a bit easy to mock U2 and to be a bit dismissive. But I loved this album. I loved everything about it. And we went on to name one of our children Joshua. And for our 30th wedding anniversary, we went to California. And on the day of our 30th wedding anniversary, we drove into the Joshua Tree National Park with the Joshua Tree pounding on the stereo under blue skies. And we just looked at each other and went, good God, we got this far. And the track from the Joshua Tree, my favourite track personally is One Tree Hill. But I would go for Where the Streets Have No Name, just for that feeling of driving into the Joshua Tree National Park, which did not disappoint on any level. It was amazing. What an amazing experience that was. So yeah, that would be my other song for Clive. Let me tell you that the world wasn't sort of standing there with open arms for Russian graduates in 1984. Very few of us ended up working, doing anything to do with Russian at that time. So yes, we were released on the world. My dad had a shipping and oil consultancy by this point. His receptionist had been complaining of stomachache, and she didn't turn up for work one day because she'd had a baby. She'd been pregnant for 9 months and hadn't written. Nobody had even suggested it. They just thought she had a bit like maybe an ulcer. So nobody picked up on it. So she had a baby and they were left with no receptionist or telephonist as it was. So Dad said, oh, right, have a job. Clive couldn't get a job either. So he ended up working for my dad. And that's where we started out. And we moved back to Oxford, to a little cottage up in Boars Hill outside Oxford. And I have to say, I thought life was fairly dreadful. I did not want to leave university. I loved university. I loved being with my friends. I loved the freedom. And frankly, I thought the first year out of uni, I thought, if this is the rest of my life, shoot me now, because the thought of getting up and going to work every morning and doing a boring job and being confined was just awful. But I sort of worked my way up through my dad's business. I became an analyst, shipping and credit and oil analyst. Met one of my great friends there. She started at the same time as me. And yeah, gradually life chirped up a bit. After a few years working for my dad, I got my big job, my big opportunity up in London, working for the General Council of British Shipping, where for some completely inexplicable reason, they thought I was competent to work on shipping law and taxation, shipping taxation. Who could have ever given me that job? Clive was still trying to get a job up in London, eventually got one, but down in Cardiff with Chemical Bank. We just ended up moving down to Cardiff. He's from Wales anyway, and we could afford a house down there. So I left that job, and we bought our first house in Cardiff in 1987, just before we married. I did a whole retraining and then got a job with Welsh Development Agency as an economist and an IT specialist. How I have ever pulled off any of these jobs is completely beyond me. I mean, a more ridiculously underqualified person is just sort of hard to imagine. But yes, I had this job with the Welsh Development Agency for a couple of years, working as an economist. God help them. Towards the end of my time at the Welsh Development Agency, I set up, it was at the time of Perestroika and Glasnost, so I set up my own company with a colleague from the Welsh Development Agency. So in theory, I had the Russian knowledge and he had a contact from one of the Baltic states, from Latvia. Everything was opening up in the Soviet Union at this time. But there was a lot of money. So there were lots and lots of products that they could export, and they were desperate for dollars. So we set up this business called Sovinform, which we produced a directory which listed all of the then Soviet, now Russian companies that were looking for trading partners in the West, because you had to have a trading partner deal to be able to do the work. Around this time, I found out that I was pregnant with my first child. Ooh, so not the best timing. And it turns out that the organisation that we'd become involved with over there, they actually wanted us to export gangs of prostitutes to work the Western European seaboard. And then Ian couldn't get out of Latvia. I was like heavily pregnant back at home. Thank God Clive never gave up the day job. And we spent a lot of money producing these directories, some of which sold, some of which didn't. And my dad had become involved. We ended up losing a lot of money. To this day, I wouldn't go back to Latvia. I wouldn't go to Latvia. So I'm keeping out of that. So that was a bit stressful and disastrous. So laugh about it now. I don't think we did at the time. Yeah, that was a bit of an adventure. The thing that always upsets me now, that during my heifer years, as I went into it, it was the time that the rave culture was starting up in Manchester, and everybody started clubbing and Summer of Love and everything. And I was not there for that. I'm going to be 60. I would still go dancing every night if I could. I would go dancing every night. So I was very sorry to have missed that. I've caught up in some ways, but yeah, you can't be too tragic though, can you really? All of that then was happening, and it was all happening around the Hacienda. And I was up at Leeds when the Hacienda opened, and we went over for one club night there. We all loaded on a bus and went over, which was quite exciting. But I was really into the band Orange Juice, and they played there once. Went to see them there once. But yeah, so this was all happening, this whole alternative sort of universe, if you like, whereas I was there being pregnant and married with a mortgage, working for the Welsh Development Agency and having some rather difficult relations with some Latvians. I really, really liked Erasure. And so all of that kind of the sort of the more poppy, dancey music that was coming out at that time was important. Clive and I didn't know what to do with this baby at all. I mean, we loved him, but it was just terrifying. The thought you had this responsibility for this other human being and nobody was going to come and take it away from you. You had to do it. We had dogs. We've always had dogs as long as we've been married, but a small humanoid was terrifying. But that said, I loved that child with every inch of my being, and I continue to do so. He's my boy. He came home from Cambridge in his second year, and he said, listen to this. And he put on Come on Philby, Illinois, Sufjan Stevens, and the song Chicago, listening to that. And a few days later, we went off skiing. And I just remember going up through the mountains, listening to that whole album. And it will always makes me think of Dan.
I fell in love again. All things go, all things go. Drove to Chicago. All things know, all things know. We sold our clothes to the state. I don't mind, I don't mind. I made a lot of mistakes in my mind, in my mind. You came to take us. All things go, all things go. To recreate us. All things grow, all things grow. We had our mindset. All things know, all things know. You had to find it.
We moved to Warburg in 1990, and Clive was working crazy long hours with a commute and was to continue to do so for the next 30 years. You know, he'd leave the house at 6 a.m. and not get back till late at night. And when he was working for the Japanese bank, he was having to do Japanese lessons after work, of sort of 2-3 nights a week. It was hard. We had no money. I'd lost a lot of money on the Sovinform business. So I had to work as well, part-time. So I got a job at the Open University, their southern region, just outside Oxford, as their IT coordinator. Again, really? But, you know, I did it for a number of years. Halloween 1992, Indy was born, a very good birth. And she was a good girl. She's very definite personality. Yeah, she's amazing. My song for Indy, Justin Timberlake, Mirrors, when she went to university at Nottingham Trent to study fashion management. She was always very determined about what she was going to do, and she did it. And she's been a very determined girl. And it was just the period where she was still enough of a mummy's girl to enjoy me going up for the day. And we were driving around the car around Lenton in Nottingham, on our way to Asda or something really exciting. And this song came on the radio, and we had the sunshine was shining, and we were listening to it. And that would always make me think of Indy. She went off to New York the following year for part of her studies. And New York was the making of her. She is an incredibly dynamic, forceful, strong, independent woman now. But just for that little bit of time, she was still my little girl. And so that song will always remind me of Indy.
Aren't you something to admire? 'Cause you shine at something like a mirror, and I can't help but notice you reflect in this heart of mine. If you ever feel alone and the glare makes me hard to find, just know that I'm always very loud on the other side. 'Cause with your hand in my hand and a pocket full of soul, I can tell you there's no place we couldn't go. Just put your hand on the past, I'll be trying to pull you through. You just gotta be strong. I don't wanna lose you now. I'm looking right at the other half of me. The biggest see the set in my heart is a space and now you're home. Show me how to fight for now, and I'll tell you, baby, it was easy coming back into you once I figured it out. You were right here all alone. It's like you're my mirror. My mirror staring back at me.
When Indy was still a baby, in arms, I found out that I was pregnant with Joshi, my youngest, our youngest, and that was a bit of a shock. Not what I was oh God, we weren't expecting. I think Clive actually said, how? So, normal way. And Joshi was born in April 94. He did have that bit of a blip when he was younger, although then went on to become a really gifted sportsman and hugely social, did really well at school. But my song for Joshy is The Cardigans, my favourite game, because when he was at nursery, when he was little, and I'd go and drop him off and pick him up every day in Henley, I used to bring him an ice bun, and it was very difficult. He was having very intensive speech therapy, but that we'd get in the car, and quite often The Cardigans, my favourite game, would come on the radio, and we would just sit and go, duh, 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 and we loved it. And that song, many songs remind me of our children, but that one always makes me think of Joshy, who has just grown up to be an amazing person, amazing accomplished person. So things that you think are set in stone in childhood don't necessarily have to be the end of the story. When Joshy, our youngest, became quite ill, I ended up giving up work at the Open University, which, I mean, I had a few maternity leaves off as well, which I didn't mind at all, actually. I've never particularly enjoyed being in an office or having to go to work. And we spent a year trying to get sort of diagnosis for Joshy. He had an autistic regression, and he had to go to a special nursery and things. So things, it looked a bit grim, but at that point, although we'd made friends in the village and our social life was taking off, it was at that point that I think I became really quite immersed in village life. Oh my goodness, it's such a great place to live. We have down the years, we've had village weekends, with live music, discos, village shows. So I was a producer of the village show. So involving everybody from little children up to 80-year-olds performing on stage, movable feasts, sort of historical societies, every aspect of village life. What was so important to me after my childhood, which wasn't all bad or anything like that, but was my children had one place to live, one school to go to, that they had utter stability from that point of view, and which they had. And we became, through school, through the playgroups, we met lots of other families, and our children were raised as part of a large tribe in this village. We made friends with their parents, so we would be round at people's houses for supper. The kids would be in another room watching videos, or we would all go on holidays together. It was an incredibly, talk about a village raising a child. So all of our children were raised together, and many of them are still good friends. They meet up in London and things. They always come home. So that was a fantastic thing. We didn't have Sunday lunch. Our sporting fixtures were too complicated for us to ever have a Sunday lunch. But we would tend to eat at about sort of, 5-6 o'clock on a Sunday. And we would very often join with other families in the village, or my sister and her kids, but most often with our friends, the Coxes, who lived in Abingdon. The album that would often be on the turntable, which always makes me think of these days with the kids, maybe about 9 to 13 going on, is Air, Moon Safari. And the first track on that album, La Femme d'Argent, oh my goodness, whenever I hear it now, I'm just sent back to those days. So that's one. Another song that just makes me think of what was quintessential village life is Billy Joel, Piano Man. The night before Dan went to university, we invited all the friends round. So about 6 o'clock, the most stuff was packed, ready to go. I was absolutely traumatized at the thought of my beloved, beautiful first son going off to university. By 3 o'clock the next morning, I don't know what had happened, but people were downloading music. They were like jumping around to Van Halen. People were face planting. These aren't the kids. These are the adults. People were so drunk. Somebody bought like takeaway curries in. Somebody then downloaded Billy Joel Piano Man, and everybody was singing that in the sitting room. We got up the next morning. I drove to Cambridge to Corpus Christi College. Clive was in a coma in the front seat. Dan was on the back seat, chucking up in a plastic bag. So we, in the pouring rain, and that's how we rolled into Cambridge. Like, it was desperate. And whenever I drove over to Cambridge to make the journey in the years after that, that song would always come on the radio for some reason. And yeah, that's a real village song, real good sing-along song.
It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. A regular crowd shuffles in. There's an old man sitting next to me, making love to his tonic and gin. He says, son, can you play me a memory? I'm not really sure how it goes, but it's sad and it's sweet, and I knew it complete when I wore a younger man's clothes. La 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 la. Sing us a song, you're the piano man. Sing us a song tonight. Well, we're all in the mood for a melody, and you've got us feeling all right.
Once we'd sorted Joshy out on the road to recovery, and that was, it was a slow process to start with. Clive was working such crazy hours that it made sense for me to be at home running things. And I was quite happy to do it. And I'd always wondered what it would have been like to study history. The University of Oxford, their extramural department offered a diploma at that point, which I went on in the evenings to do and found I loved it, and then went on to do a full undergraduate diploma. And with subsequent 2 masters, one in English local and regional history as part of Kellogg College in Oxford, and then my applied landscape archaeology masters. So that took me, quite a few years, but I loved it. I worked so hard. I'd been the laziest student on the planet, bar none. I mean, you speak to any of my friends, they just laugh about how awful I was. But there was something about having 3 children, a home, responsibilities. I would go into the Bodleian Library, I would sit and work, and I'd be there sort of like looking at the undergraduates going, oh, I'm so tired. I was thinking, tired? I've done 3 loads of laundry, and I've taken my child to tennis, and I've done this and I've done that. And I worked. But it was more than that. Sometimes some of the courses, some of the different classes you would do, I'd come out with my head spinning just with the ideas. Oh my goodness, I met great people, I did great things, and particularly when I started on the archaeology, landscape archaeology masters, going away on digs up into Orkney, local digs. I got to say, digging is overrated. It normally rained. I got bad knees. I got stinking cold. Apart from one, I'd excavated a boat out in Port Meadow in Oxford. That was really interesting. But just all the ideas. Oh my goodness. I loved it. I worked really hard. I worked really hard on all my dissertations. So that was a big thing for me. Most of my friends went on to do their DPhils, their doctorates, and I could have done it, and I just didn't, because I don't think I wanted to sit and do a 40,000 word thesis. I loved the learning. I just didn't necessarily want to do all of that. But I went on to then run a little museum, help curate a museum in Dorchester, and I've taught, and I worked as a landscape consultant for a while, advising people on their landscapes. And one person thought they had a capability Brown Park, and so I had to go and do all the history and make recommendations and stuff. So, I did it, but it was interesting that when the push came to shove, and I could have started to sort of climb up the old greasy pole in academe in Oxford, and I could have done it. I think I was told that is possible. I didn't do it. That's interesting, isn't it? My brother was always in bands. He then joined a band called On a Friday. He was from Abingdon School. They went on to become Radiohead. Although it feels a bit vicarious to talk about it, Radiohead have been an hugely important part of our lives over the past 30 years. They used to practice in my bedroom when I was at university, when they were still On a Friday, before they were Radiohead. A couple of them played at our wedding. They used to drive around in a big old ex-News International van to all the gigs that used to be parked at my parents' big old house in Abingdon. It was so exciting. It was so exciting, that sort of, not so exciting these days. It's just what he does. But then, we used to go to all the gigs. Well, we have continued our whole lives to go to all the gigs. Yeah, it's been a ride. We've been all over the world watching them and watching how they've developed over the years. Yeah, Radiohead, big news in our family. I mean, our kids can't imagine anything else because it's always been there. And my brother is the most brilliant, down-to-earth man. He's not very rock and roll. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that. But he's done such fantastic things outside Radiohead. He's had his solo career. He's written music for Ballyrombare. He's been involved in a lot of charity stuff as well. He's written film music, and all of it being a really lovely, lovely man. Real family man. Got my 3 beautiful nephews, his wife, Kate. That's been a bit of a family adventure, although it was very definitely Philip's adventure. I could have chosen anything. Probably it would be something from OK Computer, which sounds a bit, it probably would be something from OK Computer. And I would go with the opening track, Airbag, because I tell you, there's a rhythm section. Listen to that. they played a homecoming gig. I think it was 2001 in South Park in Oxford. And it was like the backstage was set up like a wedding reception. It was amazing. And while they were setting it up, it was like a village behind the stage. And Philip lived just around the corner at that point. So he and my eldest nephew and I in the buggy went round the backstage, and I got to get onto stage while they were doing some sound checks. I was able to say, yeah, good afternoon, Oxford. Are you ready to rock? And I thought, this should have been me. This should have been me. I'd have loved to have been this person. So it was quite exciting. And we were all at the gig was amazing. It was all like A-listers from Oxford. It was stunning. And our eldest Dan was there at the gig as well. It poured with rain later. And we all had to get the bus home. And Dan stayed at this after-show party with my brother to stay the night. And we left him like walking over towards the Gallaghers and Kate Moss and everybody. And I thought, well, we've got to get the bus home, and we're leaving our 11-year-old here. This is just not right. And for my brother's solo career, I'm going to choose, I think, from the Weatherhouse album, It Will End in Tears. And he did a storming performance of this with the Dap Kings on one of those late night shows in America. And I was watching it, so proud. And every time that, I watch Philip live on stage, wherever it's been, from a pub in Oxford to Glastonbury to wherever in the world, I just always feel that huge sense of pride that he's done that.
Welcome back. Hang out the flags. I'm not bitter. Well, hey for you. You stole the show. Back from the cold. Did you miss me? Bet you stayed in all the time. Remember me? I used to be something, didn't I? But it's not my time now. I'll be leaving. Stay inside. I hate goodbyes. Don't be bitter now. We could spend a lifetime in a weather house. Where have you been? What made you leave? I'm still waiting. Impatiently. You and I, side by side, always missing. One for rain and one for shine. Remember me? I used to be.
Yeah, my sister Nicola was born 2 years after me, also in Bristol. And throughout our childhood, we were close-ish, but it wasn't till, and they've got terrible stories, she and Philip, about me selling, like being a profiteer on sweet shops and buying sweets and selling it to them at markup prices. I think that's probably quite unfair. But it wasn't really till we moved to Oxfordshire and we were very much thrown together physically in terms of sharing a bedroom. We became very close, and she is undoubtedly one of the most important people in my life. We shared a social life in Oxford. We've shared raising our children. We managed to pop out one between us for 5 years. She's an amazing person. She's a special needs teacher, now working also at one of the Oxford colleges as well, helping students there that have issues. 2012, she had breast cancer, and I can honestly say it was one of the worst times of my life. Fortunately, my kids were older, so that I could share looking after her with her partner. And I have to say, it sounds strange, but in a weird way, we got to sit on her bed and read magazines and just chat on like we had done for years and years, and just spend all this time together. Do you know, there's a bit in Fleabag where Fleabag's sister says, Claire, she says, you're the person I run through an airport for. And I'd like to think I'd run through an airport for my husband and children and some other people and my brother. But that I absolutely identified with that. She is such an important person in my life. And I don't talk to many people every day, but I do tend to talk to my sister most days. And we can just talk about absolutely nothing. She gets me, and she's tremendously supportive. I love her. So, I wouldn't be without her for all the world. So we used to listen a lot to Yesterday Once More, but I would love to play Goodbye to Love, which was also on this album. And I think it's one of the saddest songs that there is. Karen Carpenter's voice is beautiful. And the thing that makes it for me is Tony Peluso's guitar solo at the end. That guitar solo, it still makes the hairs stand up on my arms. It is fantastic. About 2012, we used to have these big village events called the Village Weekend, which would be, we'd do Stars in Their Eyes on Friday night in the big top. We would literally have a big top on the village green. We've got a great village green. And so we would do, the first bit would be Stars in Their Eyes. So everybody loads of people in the village would do their acts, and we'd have the Matthew Kelly figure and everything. And my friends and I used to always appear, but on the Saturday night there tended to be a live band. In the day there'd be sort of games and all kinds, and then they would have a disco. One night somebody said, can you do the disco after the band has finished? So I went, okay, and it started there. So I started becoming a bit of a rubbish DJ Karen, DJ K I am known as. People started to pay me to do it. Can you believe it? What a laugh, honestly, jokes. So it's normally a bit shambolic. I normally have a bit too much to drink before I do it, but it's all like just cheesy, like guilty pleasures, disco, quite a lot of sort of ravey music, dance music, real mixture. I think I've retired. I think one doesn't want to be a completely sad old bag, certainly. And so I think I am retiring, but yeah, it's been quite a laugh, honestly. So a couple of years ago, I did a bucket list and went to Ibiza. So I'd never been to Ibiza, always wanted to go to Ibiza. And we went with our friends, and he sorted us to have VIP tickets to Pasha. Oh my God. So it was all right, but we were there for DJ Luciano. We went down to the dance floor a lot, and I stayed till the bitter end because we'd paid and I was going to do it. But honestly, it was just sort of like, it was a bit semi-euphoria. He'd bring the audience up, all the lights would go on, and then he and his mates, he had like his acolytes, they'd all high-five each other, and then that would be it. And then you'd be back to a bit of dubstep. And that was it. I was thinking, really? Put some Michael Jackson on, mate. Come on. This is just rubbish, actually. And it was quite, I thought it was quite disappointing. Quite disappointing, to be honest. All of that early old school stuff, absolutely brilliant. We went to Glastonbury. I went once in the teens, a load of us bundled into a car. In these days, you could just do these things. Drove down there, went in. There wasn't really any security. We slept in a car. I don't remember a lot about it, to be honest with you. It was all a bit uncomfortable. And of course, you come back and say, oh, that was fantastic. In fact, I remember thinking, well, I'd just rather be at home. This is really uncomfortable. And my sister had a similar experience at the battle. I think she was at Stonehenge when it had all gone a little bit tits up the year before, around then. We were doing all these things that we thought were crazy and cool, but really we'd have rather been at home. But I went back to Glastonbury after the heifer years, reading the children. I think it was 2003. My brother's band were headlining. I went down for the day at that point with my friend Heather. Oh my goodness. For once, the sun was shining. We went round, we saw amazing bands. I met up with friends from university who helped run the circus at Glastonbury every year. We saw Radiohead, we saw other bands, we saw the Flaming Lips, and it was so, oh my goodness, I can't tell you how I felt there. It felt like I've come home. And since then, I have been numerous times. And I meet up with my friends and I dance all night. We go and see the dawning. So Paola and I try to do that whenever I'm at Glastonbury. We meet up, we go to Guilty Pleasures discos. And it was a pleasure to take my kids to Glastonbury and to introduce that to them. I've been very much put in mind of Glastonbury recently with all the mud everywhere, just the sheer hard work moving around in the years where the rain is bad. But I've seen some outstanding sets, and it's like being a teenager sometimes. Again, you just run off into the night. I think after the last one, I think I might have overdone it at my age, maybe. I don't know. But I was so tired. I don't think I slept properly for 5 days or so. And I nearly ran the car off the road driving home. And actually got quite unwell afterwards. I think I was just exhausted. So we were all there. My sister was there, various children, nieces, nephews, my brother. So will I go back? I don't know. If I could guarantee some sunshine, I probably would. I don't think I could go and do the mud again. And I don't think I can stay up all night for 4 nights again either. It was in 2003. They just started the Hail. No, they were finishing the Hail to the Thief tour. They came on, and the opener was there, and the sound that night was so pure. I can't describe what the sound was like on the Pyramid stage that night. We'd been to a lot of the tour already, but somehow that night it was utterly magical. In 2011, for my 50th year, I decided to do something different each month. That was how I was going to celebrate it. I was absolutely cool about being 50 in a way that I am not about the impending birthday. And one of the things I did was to go to Kazakhstan with my friend Kathy Mack. We went trekking to look for wild tulips, and I had to go and take some Russian. She made me go and do some Russian lessons before I went back. But what an amazing experience that was. And that really set the tone for the next decade. And since that time, I have traveled so much. I've been to America, I've been to South Africa, to Australia, to every European capital, just about, to the Arctic, to India, you name it. We've traveled there if we can. And our road trips in America in particular have been amazing. I am a sad quizzer, it must be said. I've been part of the Warburg and Shillingford quiz team, and we play in a league, no pubbing, no drinking, completely no conferring in questions. And I'm a quizmeister. I've been doing that for 20 years. And I also set quizzes. I've been doing it for the village online on Zoom during lockdown, and do it the pub quizzes. I quiz. I love a quiz. I particularly like a music quiz. Oh, yes. One of my aims is one day to be on Popmaster with Ken. I'd be a bit worried that I'd actually lose it. They'd ask me lots of stuff about recent music or something like that. But yeah, I love a quiz. A big part of my later life certainly has been yoga, which I became interested in about 10, 12 years ago, and then really found it at a time when I was incredibly busy and life was a little bit stressful. I found the mental aspects of yoga, the very quietening aspects, to be incredibly beneficial. And in 2012, I went on a long yoga retreat with my friend Dawn, and we went out to the hills outside Rome, which was pretty great, and met a group of people, a group of girls that have become my friends. And ever since then, we did lots of holidays with yoga. Actually, not a lot of yoga, more drinking than yoga. I carried on doing local classes. And in 2017, I did a yin yoga training week with Norman Blair, who is the principal exponent of yin yoga in this country. Norman went on to become my teacher and my mentor. And as a result of that, I did my 200 hours yoga teacher training with Universal Yoga down in Somerset, where I met some of the most amazing people. Who expects in your late 50s to find a new group of friends? And when I graduated at the end of 2017, I set up my own yoga studio in our garden, the Yin Garden, and I've been teaching ever since. The cabin at the bottom of my garden was the Love Shack. We built it about 12 years ago at a time when we had a lot of teenagers in the house as a bit of an overspill. Our house has become a little bit like my own home was as a teenager, became a centre for lots of friends. And we're really, really lucky that the kids always brought their friends home. And Joshy in particular, his friends used it, and it became a party. It was a party place. I cannot lie. It has been party central. We've tried to obviously keep the noise down and not to annoy neighbours too much. But I was in Wallingford Waitrose talking to a mother in the queue. I didn't know who she was, and we established that we had children in the same year at school. And she said, "Who are you?" I said, explained who I was. And she said, "The one with the Love Shack." She said, "I would never let my daughter come to your house." And I thought, ooh, unfit mother. So we had to exercise it for the yoga studio. But it was a scene of lots of fun. Actually for adults as well, and for all the children. No longer in use. So yes, a piece of music I play regularly in my classes. In the Shavasana, the rest at the end is By Your Grace by Krishna Das. Beautiful piece of music.
closer than breath. You are the air, sweeter than life itself. You are here. I am a wanderer. You are my peace. I am a prisoner. You are release. Jai Gurudev, 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 Jai Gurudev. I am a pilgrim, the road so long.
We lost our mum very, very suddenly, 2006. She woke up one morning with a headache. We didn't know. And she died. She had a bleed on the brain. We were utterly shocked and traumatised. And we ended up in intensive care at the JR where they were keeping her alive. We couldn't really understand it because our brother was playing a gig in Amsterdam that night. And we had to try to get him home. And of course, it caused all manner of logistical problems. With they were about to go and pay to thousands of people, and he had to get home. It was all terribly shocking. My mum hadn't always had the happiest of lives, but being a grandma was a huge thing for her. She was the most brilliant grandma to all of our children. When she died, she was only 68. It was very young, and it was pretty traumatic. I think it had a deep effect on us for a number of years after that. My life now, I've taken a lot of pluses from lockdown. It was a difficult period. And if I'm going to be honest, if somebody's going to listen to this, I have lived a lot of my life under the shadow of my mother's mental illness. Yeah, a huge influence on us, into the point that I will never be like my mother. I will never be like my mother. So I've been quite strong. I've gone out. I might have titted around and done loads of different things, but I've always gone out and seized life and done it, And towards the end of 2018, I actually suffered from depression, which was very difficult for me to admit to, and very difficult to. And I think it's important to acknowledge that these things happen to you. But it's made me really revalue what I did. I was lucky in that I thought in the first lockdown, I loved the peace, the quiet, the return to nature, the fact you could go out cycling. We cycle. I mean, my husband's a really keen cyclist, Clive. I'm a less keen cyclist, but I still really enjoy it. You could go out on the roads. You weren't. It was. You'd see whole family groups out. We cycled along roads we would never cycle along. You'd hear the bird song. We really re-engaged back with nature. The two boys were home, certainly for the first 3 months. Joshy stayed for 6 months, and they've both been home again now since early December. Indy stayed in London, so that was hard. But I loved having the boys here. We had all that amazing weather in the first lockdown. And we tended to go out of the village with the dog. We'd got a golden retriever, Mabel, last January, and go up to the Chilterns. We're just on the edge of the Chilterns. We'd go and get our Dianes, which is from Marks and Spencer's, which is, the tin drinks that Diane Abbott got caught on the overground with. So we have Diane's, and we'd go and get those from M&S and some snacks, and we'd go up to Swinkham Down or up to the meadow, and we'd go up into the hills and just sit of an evening with nature. And it was just beautiful. And we did that throughout the summer and into the autumn. And that was just amazing. And to have the privilege of having your adult children home, where the only times that they're normally back home with you is if they've undergone some sort of trauma or upset at this time. And I'm sure they're probably finding it a bit traumatic, not being up in London, having their social life. But it has been a joy to be able to look after them. And I just reverted to 1950s housewife, did all the things, lunch on the table at 1. And they've been working throughout. But yeah, that reverting to nature, that real re-engagement with nature has been incredibly important. And something I would like to play, a track is something, just a small recording I took in woodland. We'd come down from the hill and we were in the woodland at the bottom of the hill, and it was turning dusk, and the bird song was unbelievably beautiful. And I've made a short recording of it in the woods, and if I was ever to be cast away on a desert island, I would like to take that with me, just to remind me of that beautiful, peaceful moment with my boys and Clivey and the dog, not with Indy, but it was just feeling very comfortable, one with nature.
And so we are nearly at the end of our story. First, let's find out a bit more about Karen. What is her favourite word?
My favourite word? Mum, because it means that one of my children is speaking to me.
What is her least favourite word?
Meetings.
During her life, what has turned her on creatively, spiritually and emotionally?
Music, nature, literature.
What turns her off?
Right-wing politicians. People being unkind. Unkindness turns me off. There's too much of that going on.
What sound or noise does she love?
Music or bird song, nature, really. Yeah, to be out in nature, to hear sort of a river flowing, hear birds, hear the wind.
What sound or noise does she hate?
Traffic noise, aeroplanes, all kinds of artificial motorised noise. Hate it.
What profession other than her own would she have done?
Which one haven't I attempted? I think that's my answer. I think I've had a pretty good go at most things.
What profession is she very pleased she never did?
Vet. My cousin Susie and I were going to be vets when we were younger. And we were very, very sure we were going to be. We would have been terrible vets. Absolutely terrible. Not a scientific bone between us.
If heaven exists, what would Karen like to hear God say when she arrives through the pearly gates?
You were wrong, you heathen. That would be it. Because I'd be very shocked. To my wonderful friends out there, whether you be from school, from Leeds, work, the village, from Oxford, or through yoga, or in any other way that I know you. I want to say thank you for your friendship over the years. Some of these friendships go back an awfully long way. I'm not going to name everybody because I'm sure to forget somebody and cause upset, but thank you for just years of fun and friendship. And in particular, to some of you, you'll know who you are, for your great love and support last year. I will never forget it. Thank you, my loves. To my family, to my wider family, in particular my cousin Susie, who was my very first friend and has been a constant in my life, to my outstanding in-laws and my really wonderful niece and nephews. What amazing, impressive people you've grown up to be, and I always enjoy time with you. And to my dad, who probably won't listen to this, but thank you, Dad, for always believing in me and encouraging me, if not disciplining me, and for always being so welcoming to all my friends. To Philip and Nicola, to the best brother and sister I could have ever hoped for. I love you two so much. Thank you. To my children, to Dan, to Indy and Joshi, my favourite people. You three are the reason I was put on this planet. I am so proud of you. I'm proud of all you've achieved and of the people you've become. I love spending time with you. Here's to the next pub crawl. And I love you with all my heart. And to Clivey, what can I say? It's been a ride, hasn't it? Not always a smooth one, but we have created a home, a family, and the fabric of a long life together. Thank you for being my rock and mostly giving me that stability, and for basically letting me do whatever I want, whenever I want, and for a cup of tea in bed every single morning. Here's to the next 38 years. Love you. This is an extract from a postcard from the volcano by Wallace Stevens. Children picking up our bones will never know that these were once as quick as foxes up the hill. Thank you, anybody that's bothered to listen to me go on for however long it's been. So I'd like to leave you with my final musical choice, and those of you who come to my shambolic DJ sets will know that there is one tune that I always like to finish on. It is Out of Space. I give you The Prodigy.
I'll take your brain to another dimension.